Welcome to session 1 of Seeing as Jesus Sees. I'm so eager to introduce you to a new spiritual practice, a simple prayer, something that could really change your walk with God and your perspective on everything. The businessman took his seat on a New York subway, exhaled, unfurled his newspaper. And suddenly, 3 rambunctious boys boarded and broke his hopes of a tranquil ride. The unruly kids bounced all about loudly, bumping into passengers, grabbing at their papers. And only one thing irritated the businessman more than these uncontrolled kids, and that's the passive father who sat motionless, inattentive, unconcerned. Ugh! The businessman was brooding inwardly. Doesn't his father care that his children are bothering everyone? Put yourself in the commuter's shoes. How would you feel? This is so irritating. The problem with the world today, no one disciplines their kids. What a bad parent, so insensitive. How can he just sit there? I sure would do a better job if they were my kids. Imagine his misery. This is going to be a horrible train ride. And as the kid's rude behavior continued, the businessman's patience just expired, and he just had to say something. Excuse me, sir, your children are really disturbing a lot of people. I wonder if you shouldn't control them? And as if emerging from a fog, the father responded quietly and apologetically, "Oh, you're right. I guess I should do something, boys. Boys, calm down. We just came from the hospital, and their mother died about an hour ago, and I just don't know what to think, and I guess they don't know how to handle it either." The businessman might have longed to swallow his words and start all over again and just melt into his seat. But something far more wonderful happened. Something almost miraculous. His frustration and stress evaporated, and his heart began spilling over with authentic compassion for the bereaved man. "I'm so sorry," he said. What can I do to help you?" he said, and he meant it. The businessman was the well-known author of The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Stephen Covey, who summarized the power of seeing a scene with new eyes with these words: "Everything changed in an instant." Impatience became kindness. Frustration became compassion. Judgment became mercy. Bitterness became gratitude. Everything changed in an instant. What changed him? Was he changed by telling himself to be more patient? No. He was changed by new vision. For Christians who want to grow spiritually, it seems natural to ask, what would Jesus do? But I think it's the wrong question for the same reason that trying to live by the law is the wrong pursuit. It's powerless. Though most people focus on doing, it's seeing that matters. How we see ourselves and others and the world shapes how we think, how we feel, how we behave. When we see things wrongly, it wreaks havoc in our relationships. It wrecks our peace. And we miss the seeing of all the grace all around us. It snuffs out our wonder and joy. We don't have to wander around duped and distracted. Jesus promised, "Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness." When we see like Jesus, we experience His peace and His joy. Some years ago, a friend mentioned he wished there were a book about what Jesus sees, about how Jesus sees things. I couldn't find a book like that, but I even more so realized how little attention I'd given to such a profound question. And so I began asking Jesus throughout the day, "How do you see this?" Brief enough for a single breath, but deep enough to change everything. What we see, how we see, if we see, that's the real question. To want Jesus' eyes is to welcome a massive shift of focus. Instead of grabbing for happiness by doing more or getting more, we let joy arise by seeing what we've been missing or misunderstanding. Some years ago, my brother Mark and I met to play a round of golf, and we were teamed up with a third player we'd never met. And my middle brother and I weren't necessarily playing very well, but we sure seemed like Tiger Woods and Phil Mickelson compared to this stranger. He was terrible. He hit balls in the water, in the woods, and the bunkers, but he was jubilant. He was far happier than we were. And so finally, my brother, Mark, he asked the fella, he said, you may not be playing the best golf, he said, but you sure do seem happy. And the man said, "Oh, I am." I just came from the doctor's office. They thought it was malignant cancer, but the report is benign. I don't even have cancer. He said, I'm just so glad to be out here. He hit a ball in every lake and every forest, and the rest of the day, he had the best time I've ever seen a golfer have. What if you're only one revelation away from a new kind of joy that transcends your circumstances? As we'll discover, life through Jesus' eyes isn't a mere pleasantry. It's a gateway to power over the darkness. Miracles happen when we see as Jesus does. Do you yearn for more experience of God's supernatural power at work in and through you? Then let Him open up your eyes. There's almost no limit to how much we can change when our eyes are opened. I think of those depressed Luke 24 disciples, the ones on the dusty road to Emmaus on that first Easter day, who were unaware of the miracle of the empty tomb. When the risen Messiah mysteriously appeared alongside them, the oblivious disciples, the text says, stood still, looking sad, because their, quote, eyes were kept from recognizing Him in Luke 24. But after a Bible study and a meal with Jesus, their eyes were opened, and everything changed in an instant. When they realized that the Lord wasn't dead in a grave, but alive in their midst, their depression evaporated in a flash, and joy rushed into their hearts, and they sprinted to tell others what they'd seen. Seeing things anew through Jesus' eyes can change any of us like that in an instant. And because revelation is a gift from Jesus, it changes us effortlessly. It's grace at work when we see as Jesus sees. Truth is a gift that sets us free. The old hymn is right. It is only by amazing grace that I once was blind, but now I see. Don't you yearn for that sort of eye-opening grace? Aren't you tired of trying to live better by your own strength? Whether it's a frustrated businessman on a subway or despondent disciples on a lonely road, no amount of self-talk or willpower can change us. If we're seeing things incorrectly, our good intentions and vows to be better don't make us better. Telling ourselves we ought to be more patient with unruly kids on a train will never make us more long-suffering. And vowing to be less discouraged, it'll never make us less depressed. Jesus has a better way. He is the light of the world who came to give sight to the blind. And like the Emmaus Road disciples who stood still, when Jesus began speaking to them, we can learn to pause in the midst of life's worries. We need a spiritual tool that helps us pause, at least for a moment, when life comes fast and hard. The path to new spiritual eyes starts with stopping amidst life's swirling distractions. And like those despondent disciples who joined Jesus for a meal, we can learn to connect to Christ spiritually, attuning our hearts to His. Our breath prayer is addressed to Jesus because it focuses us toward the author and finisher of our faith. And to address our request to Jesus is to become Christ-centered and invoke the power of His redemptive work that secured us a share in the mind of Christ. After pausing and connecting to Christ, this little prayer, it helps us turn, as if shoulder to shoulder with the Savior, to look in the direction that He is looking, to look with Him. When we look at life through the truth of the resurrection, we become like those Emmaus Road disciples who suddenly saw everything in a whole new light. Turning and looking with Jesus, it's a daring and thrilling inward pivot. It poises the heart to see what we haven't seen before. Pause, connect, look. This pattern of pausing, connecting, and looking is at the heart of all revelatory experiences. Abraham paused from his journey to experience God's blessing and look at the stars. Moses paused from tending sheep to connect to a voice in a burning bush and watch his staff turn to a snake. Galilean fishermen paused from washing their nets to hear from Jesus and see a new school of fish in the deep. See, practicing this simple, powerful little prayer. Jesus, how do you see this? It doesn't replace the classic spiritual disciplines like intercession and worship and meditation, but a simple new spiritual practice of asking Jesus for His eyes will cause us to slow down, link our heart to Christ's, and expect revelation from God. Of course, because there's so much at stake, the devil has from the beginning sought to blind us spiritually. The enemy will use anything available to deceive us, to distort our view. I loved my TV newsman dad, who I remember holding me as a toddler in the Myrtle Beach surf during childhood summer vacations. I remember the scratchy feel of his stubbly vacation face as he held me tight in the taller waves. I remember feeling proud that the coach of my Pee Wee football team was my dad. I remember the spy adventure stories he crafted for my brothers and me at bedtime. But I also remember watching him as he sat in that green recliner and too often would drink beer instead of being with me. I remember worrying about the prospect of a friend coming over and seeing my dad at his worst. It was marring my perspective. See, a child only sees life through the lens that he or she has. Somewhere you can begin to think that I'm less important than dad's alcohol. Maybe if I do more, then he'll be proud. So when you pray, Jesus, how do you see this? You're admitting that our sin, our weaknesses, our blurred vision, that it impairs how we're seeing things and we need His help. What might have impaired your perception of life? A deep disappointment? A shaming parent? A humiliating defeat? A great grief? A gradual abandonment? A woeful regret? When I'm honest with myself, I admit that for too much of my life, I was held back by a lens of shame. It convinced me I had to do more, be more to be fully loved. I was too hasty in my judgment of others. I was too quick to feel angry or despairing about the idolatrous lost world. What about you? Where do you need fresh vision in your life? Do you sometimes struggle to believe God really loves you and has a beautiful plan for your life? What if you saw your life from Jesus' perspective? Imagine your self-imposed limits melting away through the lens of Jesus' perfect love. Do you strive too much in your relationships? Trying hard to change or trying hard to get someone else to change? What would happen if you could let go of judgmental perceptions rooted in old hurts and could begin seeing your mate or your friend or your coworker through the Savior's eyes? And what about your fears and frustrations with this morally broken world? Are you sick and tired of dwelling on bad news? Wouldn't it be liberating to see the world through Christ's eyes of hope rather than our worldly despair? We're going to discover new lenses for the eyes of our hearts. But this series is about more than just correcting spiritual nearsightedness. It's also about seeing all the wonder we've been missing. There's a big difference between reading a brochure about the Grand Canyon and seeing it with your own eyes. Jesus wants to show us the canyon of His grace. He yearns to fill you with His Spirit and show you the beauty He sees. It's why He was eager to take the cross, bear our sin, and make us right with God. He longed to send His Spirit, promising He will guide you into all the truth. It's why He inspired Paul to pray, having the eyes of your hearts enlightened, that you may know what is the hope to which He's called you, what are the riches of His glorious inheritance in the saints, and what is the immeasurable greatness of His power toward us who believe. God delights to open our eyes to wonder. And when you see something that makes you feel alive, don't you want those you love to see it too? When we vacation at the beach, my wife likes to start unpacking immediately. But I like to throw off shoes, dig toes in the dunes, greet the surf as if embracing an old friend. And some years ago, we arrived at the beach at sunset. The horizon over the western end of Ocean Isle Beach was on fire with red streaks and orange swirls that just turned the sand into gold and made the sea glow with an amber. Oh, it was beautiful. I stood there, breathtaking, cheering God's handiwork for a moment. And then I sprinted inside and I said, Ann, you got to see this sunset. It's glorious. Okay, she said, I'll be there in a little while. Let me unload these groceries. I said, all right, but quick. I said, please come quick. You're going to love it. I dashed back out, stood on the beach another moment watching God's fireworks. She didn't come. So I rushed back in. Ann, sweetie, come now. Sunsets don't last. You'll regret missing this one. The milk, the eggs, the suitcases can wait. Please, honey, come, please. My pleading worked, and soon I'm holding hands with wonderful Ann in the dunes and staring at the sky as the sea oats are dancing and the palm trees are clapping in appreciation of God's artistry. And I was happier because the one I love was seeing the wonder with me. I think Jesus invites us into discipleship the way I invited my wife into the sunset. Come and you'll see, Jesus said. Can you feel the Savior's excitement? He has beauty to share. Behold what I behold, Jesus says. Look through my eyes. See what's real, what's important, what's beautiful, and discover joy in the vision. Take my hand. Let me show you what you've been missing. That's what Jesus offers, and that's the gospel.